Today, I'm going to be telling you all about my favorite features of Xamarin Studio and how they can make your life easier. So if you just remember one thing from this talk and it saves you 20 minutes every day, I will consider that a great success. My name's Michael Hutchinson. I've been working on Xamarin Studio and its predecessor, Develop, for many, many years. I started out as an intern back in 2006 as the Google Summer of Code, and I've been working on it ever since on pretty much every part. So I am very, very familiar with it, and I'm here to tell you about many of the things that I find useful in working more quickly, more efficiently, and just enjoying using it more. So first of all, I'll start out with a quick tour of the Workspace. I'm sure you're all familiar with it, but I'm just going to make sure we have some of the basic terms down before I get into more detail. So this is the Workspace. I'm sure you've all seen it. You're all familiar with it. The document is right there in the middle. All your documents open there, of course. Works just like a web browser, close tabs with middle click. The solution pad is where you browse your project, you add files, remove files, move them around, change their build actions. You can auto-hide pads. If you double-click on the pad header, the pad will hide off to the side, hover the mouse, it pops back up, helps to save space. The most important thing here, apart from the document, of course, is the global search. That helps you get around very, very quickly. Just type in a file name or a type, hit enter, and it'll take you straight to it. I don't even use the solution pad anymore since we implemented that feature. It is very, very useful. I'll get into a bit more detail on that later. Now, one of the big changes we made in Xamarin Studio was that we cleaned up the toolbar a lot. It now just shows you the most important information. So the configuration and target selectors are important because they tell you what you're building, what device it's going to run on. There's also the notification area there in the middle that tells you whether a build succeeded, how many results a search found, and so on. And of course, there's the global search, which is the way to find your way around efficiently. Now, something that is very, very important in most software is key bindings. And in an IDE, they're more important than anywhere, because if you learn a few key bindings, of course, you can move around very efficiently. You don't have to open the menus. And of course, any command you see in a menu will have a key binding beside it. Some don't have key bindings beside them. If you use it a lot or you don't like the key binding, you can go to the preferences and you can change the key binding to something that you prefer more. So if you prefer the Visual Studio key bindings and you want to use those on the Mac, you can go to the preferences and change the key bindings there to use, say, F11 for debugger stepping and so on. And that is just, you open up the preferences dialog, key bindings, general key bindings. And you can search for key bindings in there so you can find all of the key bindings that are available. There are even some key bindings, some key bindable commands that are not accessible from the menu, some more advanced commands, things like transpose. It takes the two characters around the cursor, switches them. Of course, you could do that by just typing, just delete them and type them again. But if that's something you do a lot, you can go and find the key binding and use that. The editor is also very customizable. That's where you spend all your time. So in Preferences, Text Editor, you can enable code folding. We turn that off by default in Xamarin Studio to clean it up, because a lot of people don't use code folding, but a lot of people do like it too. Who here uses code folding a lot? That's a lot. So yes, Go to Preferences, turn it back on. There are also many markers that are useful. So, for example, in the screenshot here, you may not be able to see it. I'll go back and show that in the demo with a zoom. But you can turn on markers so you can see where the new lines are, where the tabs are, where the spaces are. There's a column marker that shows you when your caret reaches, say, 120 characters, so you don't take your lines too long. You can change the word breaking mode. So, of course, you navigate words with Control and Alt, left and right. If you want that to behave on Mac like it does on Windows, you can go and change it to the sharp develop word breaking mode on Mac, and it will then behave just like it does on Windows. There's even a emulation mode for those among you who like Vi and Vim. It's not perfect, but it's there. The build behavior is also customizable. Something I like to do is turn off automatic building before I run, because I run a lot. So this saves maybe 20 or 30 seconds every time I run, because it doesn't have to check whether to build the project. That means I then have to remember to explicitly build the project when I've made some changes, but it means I can debug very quickly without that wait while it checks whether things do need to be rebuilt or not. That, again, is in Preferences, Projects, Build. You can choose when you build whether it jumps straight to the first error or whether it jumps straight to the first warning. For example, if there's a warning, you might prefer not to jump to it when you build, because you might know that you have lots of warnings and you don't want to lose your location every time you build. But if you have a very clean build, you might prefer to jump straight to the warning so you can go and fix that warning and clean up your build right away. Or you might prefer to not jump at all and just go and look at it in the errors pad and find the error. You can choose whether you use the message bubbles that display the errors inline in the source editor like Xcode does, or you can just have them show in the error pad like Visual Studio. By default, we use error bubbles because they look really great, but sometimes if you have a lot of warnings, a lot of errors, they can look pretty cluttered. If you have files with many, many warnings, you can change it so message bubbles just display for errors and not for warnings, for example. You can choose whether it automatically saves your files before it builds, so it doesn't ask you whether you want to save them. It just saves them. Another thing that is very, very important is the policies system. A lot of people coming from other IDEs do find this unfamiliar because it's not something that Visual Studio has. It's not something that Xcode has. These are settings that change the formatting of your code, the style of your code, the way things are laid out in the solution. They are things that if you have many people working on the same solution, you want them to be consistent. So what we do is that those settings are saved into the solution, unlike Visual Studio where they are a user preference. Now, that means that if you go and change them in your preferences, they don't change your existing solutions. So you need to be aware that if you have an existing solution and you want to change the code formatting, you need to go and change that in the solution options. And if you change things in the user preferences, those only apply to new solutions that you create. There is also the custom policies dialog that lets you define policies, sets of your C# formatting, whether you use tabs and spaces, whether you want your namespaces in new files to be based on the directory structure, and so on. You can save named sets of policies, and then you can apply a named set of policies to an existing solution. Now, I'm just going to show a few of these off. I won't cover them all because there are a lot of these, and I have some much more interesting things to get to later in the talk. So So here we have the Xamarin Studio Workspace, and of course the solution pad here. And I can auto-hide the solution pad by double-clicking on the header, so I can get a bit more space there, which is useful when working on a smaller screen like this. And of course, I can just hover over it and double-click to bring it back. And in the solution options, this solution is just the employee directory sample from the Xamarin samples. You can get to that straight from the welcome page. You can download that. It's a great example of an iOS and Android app with a common project. So I just opened this up, and suppose that I had just taken this project and I was going to extend it as my own project, but I don't like the way the code is formatted. I want to apply my own policies to this. I open up the solution options. I go to the code formatting, C#, and here it's set to use a custom policy. I want to use the same formatting that Visual Studio uses. So it converts tabs to spaces. They're 4 wide. The C# formatting doesn't have a space before the bracket. Let me just zoom in so you can see that at the back, I think. Can you all see that at the back? OK, that's good. So now I've changed that. I have this file here, and it uses the default style, which has a space here. So I just do edit, format document, and it reformats it all to match the Visual Studio style. And any new code I write, the formatter will use that style. Any new files I create will also use that style. If I give this solution to someone else, everything they do will use that style as well. OK, so of course, working on large code bases, you often have to find your way around many, many files and classes. And the quicker you can find your way around, the less time you spend hunting through the solution pad. The most important thing is the global search that I mentioned. You activate it with Command dot on Mac, Control. That's actually incorrect. It's Control comma on Windows. I will fix that in the slides before I publish them. That is actually displayed in the toolbar itself, so you don't have to remember that one. Just you'll see it there. Use it. If you use it enough, I guarantee you will remember it because you will be using it a lot. It is very useful. You can go straight to files, to types, to members. You can even search the commands in there. The search, you don't have to type things out in full. You can type fragments of what you're looking for. It filters. So you can just type the first letter of each word within a file name, and it will automatically find everything that matches that pattern, just like in code completion. You can also restrict it to specific kinds of things. If you type file colon, then a search, it will only show you files. Also class colon, it will only show you classes. You can also use a suffix colon line, and then it will take you straight to that line. So you can type a file name, colon 50, it will take you to line 50. And you can also do comma column as well, if you know a very specific column. So if someone tells you, go to this file at this line, this column, just paste that in there, hit enter, and you'll go straight there. Find and replace is also very important. There are a couple of little details there that not everyone knows about. If you're using the inline search, the Control F, Command F, If you click on the little magnifying glass in that search there, you get options for case sensitivity, your previous searches. You can use regexes. You can restrict it to search in only your selected area of text. You can also search for just whole words. So if you have a word, you type in a word, it will find words, not things that have that word that's part of a larger word. Find in files, also very important. That lets you search in the project and in the solution. Now, often you want to search for something, and then you want to search for something else, but you also want to remember your previous search. Now, find in files, find references, and so on brings up a search pad. If you do another search, it clears out the search pad and replaces your previous search results with the new search results. However, in the search pad, there is a little pin icon. If you click on that pin icon, the pad is pinned, and the next time you do a search, it will bring up another pad. So you can then keep both pads and look at both sets of results. When you want the pad to go away, just unpin it, close it, and the searches will continue reusing the pad. You can pin pads, as many pads as you want. It'll just carry on creating them. Though, of course, I probably wouldn't go beyond 10 or 20 because you probably wouldn't have any space for editing text at that point. Navigation is also, I'm sure a lot of you know these key bindings, but I'm trying to have something for everyone in these talks, some of the more advanced, more complex, so hopefully everyone can learn something, everyone can take something away and save time every day. So go-to declaration is probably the most important. It is Command D on Mac and F12 on Windows. On Windows, that's the same as Visual Studio, so that's very easy to remember if you've used VS. So on any symbol in a file, any class, any local, any member, that will take you straight to the file it's defined in. It doesn't even have to be in your own code. If it's in a library, it will take you to the assembly browser and show you decompiled code for that library. Find references is sort of the inverse of go-to definition. Instead of taking you to where something's defined, it shows you everywhere it's used. This comes up in the search pad, so you can pin it. On Windows, it's Shift F12, so it's sort of the inverse. That's pretty easy. On Mac, it's actually Command Shift R. Sorry about that. I will also fix that before publishing the slides. You can remember that's because Command Shift R go to references. And of course, you go to definition, it takes you to another file. You usually want to go back to where you came from because you wanted to go and refer to something, then come back and carry on with what you are doing. So the navigation stack remembers where you've been. You can go back, you can go forwards. There are a couple of little buttons up in the top left of the document area, so you can just use those to navigate back and forwards like a web browser. However, there's also key bindings, which are just Control-Command left on Mac, Control-Alt left on Windows, takes you back, and of course, the same thing, but right instead of left takes you forwards. And of course, when you've navigated to a file, often you are editing. That's probably what you're doing most of your time. So if you can do that efficiently, you can save a lot of time that way. Code completion helps a lot, but it has a few features that are not immediately obvious. You can use camel case to search. You can just, again, type the capital letters, lowercase, just to filter that list down and find the thing. So if you're not sure, you're looking for some kind of model, just type model. There may be a view model. The list will filter down to view model, as well as all the other words with model in it. It's fantastic for exploring new APIs that you're not familiar with. Another great time-saving feature is import type. Control-Alt-Space brings up a special code completion menu that shows you all types in all libraries referenced by your solution. When you pick one of those types, it will automatically add the using required to use that type. So you don't have to type out the type, then go and resolve it, or go and add the using, then use the type. You can just import the type, and it does that work for you automatically. Also, if you prefer to write code where you just write classes that don't exist, then you use the commands to go and create classes and methods. You can turn on suggestion mode. This means when you hit space, the completion list won't try and overwrite what you wrote with the closest match. The completion list, in general, it knows everything that's valid to write at that point. If it doesn't know, it will automatically go into suggestion mode. But there are some cases where if you prefer that workflow, where you do prefer to write code by example, then go and implement it later, you can turn on suggestion mode, and the completion list will provide suggestions instead of completions. So Control-Shift-Space toggles it. So you can toggle it into suggestion mode, write some code, toggle it back into completion mode after you've gone and created those classes. There are also a lot of hidden editor commands that you can find in the key bindings panel that I mentioned before. My favorite of these is expand selection. Alt-Shift-Up expands the selection around the caret. So first it selects the word, then the sub-expression, then the statement, then the method body, then the method, then the class. So if you want to copy a line, just Alt-Shift-Up until it expands to the line, then Command-C or Control-C that line. It's really useful combined with extract method and extract local as well. So you can easily select some sub-expression, then just extract local to pull that sub-expression out to a local. Also, Alt-Up and Alt-Down take the current selected line or the line that the caret is in and move those lines up and down. So if you're just trying to reorder a few things within a method, that is also a very useful command. Also, block selection. If you want to edit many lines at once, you hold down the Alt key on Mac or the Control key on Windows and drag the mouse to create a long vertical caret. Then when you type, it will type those letters in all of those lines at once. You can also use that with backspace. So it's essentially a very long vertical caret that just operates on multiple lines at once. You can also select a block, copy that block, paste that block. Another very useful feature is context actions. These are something that will be very familiar to those among you who have used ReSharper. How many people here have used ReSharper? Okay, that's a lot. Well, for those of you, I have good news. We do a lot of the things ReSharper does. Not everything, but some of them. For the rest of you, you are about to find out some really, really useful features that will change the way you write code. The context actions are contextual code transformations. So anywhere in your code, you can just hit the Alt-Enter command, and it will show you things that it can do for you at that point. So it can, for example, turn a for-each loop into a for loop if you want more control over how it's iterating. On a property, if it's an auto property, it can automatically create a backing field. It can turn a property with a backing field into an auto property. It can turn a hexadecimal number into a decimal number. There are over 70 available. If you want to see them all, you can find them listed in preferences. So you can access them via the context menu if you're more happy with the mouse, but I would definitely recommend just learning Alt-Enter. If you go back to Windows and use VS with ReSharper, that's the same thing you use in ReSharper. Just try it out on various things. Hit Alt-Enter, see what's available, what we can do for you. I'm sure over time we will be adding a lot more of these. A more advanced version of that is source analysis. What source analysis does is that it actually analyzes all of your code on the fly, just like ReSharper does, and figures out what maybe you might be able to do better, or things that don't match your formatting policies, things that might not be quite correct, could be done more efficiently. And it underlines them on the fly. And the great thing about these is that many of them have automatic fixes as context actions. So if you see one of these source analysis errors, you just hit Alt-Enter, and chances are it can fix it. And the other thing that source analysis does is that whenever context actions are available, it shows you a little smart tag at that point. So if you're trying to discover where context actions are available, you just have to watch out for that, go and see what's offered there. And if you don't like some of the rules, you can go and turn them off. You can turn them from errors into warnings, from warnings into suggestions, and so on. It is experimental. This is not an official feature yet, though pretty much everyone I've told who's found out about it and has turned it on has stuck with it. It's very useful. But because it's experimental, it's not on by default. You do have to go and turn it on in Preferences. Just go into Preferences, Text Editor, Source Analysis, check the checkbox that says Analyze Open Files. So I'm just going to show that off now because it is my favorite feature. So here we are. I am going to navigate back to a file that has a little more code in it. OK, so here I have my caret in this rectangle constructor. And I decide that to reorganize this code a bit, I would like to factor that out into a local. So I use Alt-Shift-Up. My caret is in the rectangle F there. It expands first to the name, then to the constructor, then to the whole expression there. Actually, I went too far. I'm still holding down Alt-Shift. I just do Alt-Shift down, takes me back down, shrinks the selection back down. Now I do Alt-Enter, and I get this context menu here. These are the context actions. So here, it's offering to declare a local, extract a method, convert it to an initializer, iterate. Here, I wanted to declare a local. So I'm just going to declare a local. Zoom back out so you can see that. It's defined a new local called rectangle F. And it's already selected the name, so I can just type a new name for that. It updates both, hit Enter, and I've introduced my new local there. But now I decided, actually, I would prefer that to be more explicitly typed because I don't like var. Actually, I really like var, but for the sake of the demo, I hate var. So Alt-Enter, Enter, and it turns that into the explicit type. But then someone comes by my desk and asks me, why did you convert that? var is fantastic. I say, OK, Alt-Enter, turn it back to var. And many of these context actions also have the inverse. So Alt-Enter, there's inline local. I can turn that back, inline it, and we're back where we started. Also, extract method. Just select, Alt-Enter, extract method. I can choose where I want to put the method in my file, hit Enter, type a new name for my method. And there we go. Now, this is without source analysis. The basic context actions are available just from Alt-Enter all the time. But I'm going to go into the preferences and turn on source analysis because it is my favorite feature after the global search. Remember the global search. So I just check that checkbox. And now we have this new scroll bar shows up at the side of the file. And this scroll bar has a couple of markers in here. It's showing me that here I can remove redundant usings. Okay, back up to the top of my document. This using here is now grayed out. And it's showing me there's a hint. This using is redundant. Nothing uses it. Alt-Enter, remove redundant usings. It's gone. Here it's telling me that iOS should start with an uppercase letter. Someone should tell Apple that. They need to fix it. That's because the way that your variables are cased is a policy. So source analysis reads that policy, tells you when things don't match it. It will actually suggest a better name for it. So if I go to that, just have Alt-Enter, it's suggesting I change that to capital I, capital O, lowercase s. I think I might leave that one. This new scroll bar also shows you any syntax errors as well. So if I just introduce some bad code here, we now see a red marker shows up, showing me exactly where in my file is the syntax error or the unresolved name. Those also show up in source analysis. So it gives you a high-level view. That scroll bar gives you a high-level view of where in your file are problems, things that might be problems. It's not always. Some of these things are suggestions. They're things that you might want to do. So that's why they have different severity. So you shouldn't just go and just hit Alt-Enter everywhere in the file. That will not necessarily create good code. But definitely check it out because it is a fantastically useful feature. Now, I'm afraid I'm going to have to skip over this next section on debugging because I'm running a little short on time, but these slides will all be online, and there are a couple of extra slides at the end. I think I can still cover them. I'll just go very, very, very quickly, so don't worry about it. The slides will be online. So in the debugger preferences, if you wonder why you can't step into the framework code or libraries that you've referenced as libraries and not as projects, go into options, uncheck the option that says debug project code only. That's equivalent to just my code in VS. That will enable you to step into the monotouch class libraries and so on. Sorry, Xamarin.iOS, Xamarin.android class libraries. You can also speed up debugging. Debugging on devices can sometimes be fairly slow because whenever you stop, it has to evaluate all the properties, call toString on all the variables to display them correctly. If you turn that off, it can be faster on device, and then you get a little spinner by each variable that lets you evaluate it explicitly. Also, breakpoints. We do support trace points, conditional breakpoints, and function breakpoints. So if you use those in VS, you don't just have to set a breakpoint on a file, line, and column. You can set a breakpoint, for example, on system console write line, and it will break even though you don't have the source file. Just go and create a new function breakpoint, put in system console write line. Every time your code hits that, it will break. and you can go and find where in your code is calling that framework class. You can also have conditions on your breakpoints, so just some debugger expression that compares a local against some value, and only if that condition is true will it actually break. And you can also have what we call a trace point, which is whenever the breakpoint is hit, it prints an expression and continues. That is useful because you can do the equivalent of console write-line debugging without actually rebuilding your project. You just add a trace point, put the expression, it will evaluate it, print it. You get to all of those from the context menu on the breakpoint and the breakpoint properties. Also, watches, there's this great little feature. Anytime you hover over a variable, the tooltip comes up with the value. Just click on the pin icon, and that tooltip will stick on the editor. So as you step, it will stay, and you can watch the value change. You can also watch any expression, not just variables. You can type in some, like, instead of watching some local foo, you can watch foo is equal to 5, and the watch will show true or false, depending on how that evaluates. So I am not going to demo that. Also, the entire IDE is extensible via add-ins. There is a very rich model. It's completely built out of add-ins. You can extend pretty much any part of it. And if you want to know how to create, if there's a feature we don't have, you can add that. We do have some docs on that. If you have questions, please ask me afterwards, because I am skipping over this. But one thing about that that is very cool is that if you write one, you can publish it on our website, and then anyone in Xamarin Studio can just open up the add-in manager, select your add-in, install it right there. That's how you get to the F# add-in right now. So I'm not going to demo that either, just so you can have a chance to ask me some questions. But here are some great resources. There is my blog, mhut.ch. The Xamarin Studio forums are a great place to ask questions. I try to answer as many of them there as I can. Also, Stack Overflow, the Xamarin Studio tag. And if you're interested in writing add-ins, there are resources on the Monodevelop website. They're not always entirely up to date, but if you email me, I will definitely answer any questions you have about creating add-ins. So, any questions? The question is, does expand selection work with strings? It will select the entire string is the first operation. Then expand out to any expression including that string and so on. Yeah, sure. The question is there any way to get a copy and paste carousel so you can get to previous copies, not just the last one you copied? Yes, it is in the toolbox. So if you open up the toolbox, when the text editor is open, there is a list of all your recent copies there. So it's not accessible from key bindings right now, but you can just double-click on them and it'll insert them. Yeah? Uh-huh. You would have to talk to Miguel about that one. Yep. Okay. The question is, are there any plans to allow editors to be docked side by side? We don't have any timeline for adding that, but we are aware that it is very important. It is probably the most common feature request we get. So yes, that's definitely something we are looking into adding, but I can't promise any timeline for it. Yep. Sorry, I didn't quite catch that. The question is, do we have any plans for a database management add-in? Yes, we do have one. The problem is it is not very well maintained. It's been inherited from the open source monodevelop. So it is shipped by default on macOS, not on Windows. It allows connecting to databases, issuing queries, seeing the results, and so on. Any plans to add support for multiple selections in the text editor, you mean? No plans, no. If you do have features you would like us to add that we don't have, we do have a Xamarin user voice. So if you want to go and put things there and get all your friends to vote on it. Yep. The question is, can you run multiple instances of Xamarin Studio? Yes, you can, but it's not entirely straightforward. You can either, from the terminal, do open-n, then the name of the app, and macOS will open up 2 instances. Something else some people do, which is a little easier, is just copy the app bundle, rename it, just open up your Xamarin Studio 1 and 2. If that's because you would like to open up multiple solutions at once, you can actually open up multiple solutions at once in the same instance. So when you open the open dialog, there's a little checkbox which says close the current workspace. If you uncheck that, it won't close the current solution. It'll just open them both. You can also create a workspace, which is actually a file you can save that refers to multiple solutions. So you can just open the workspace, and it'll open up all the solutions. Is it possible to show multiple solutions side by side? No, you would have to have multiple instances of Xamarin Studio for that. Okay. Yep. Question is, can you bind to keyboard and mouse, like Control-click? No, key bindings can only be keys, I'm afraid, at this point. But yes, that is something we are also considering because it's used in Xcode and Eclipse and so on. Yep. Any more questions? Yep, sure. Is there a way to save out a set of preferences? Not preferences, but policies you can. So if you open the policies manager, you can save out your named set of policies, share that with someone else, and they can import it. Yep. Yep.
Are there any gesture supports for OS X with
There is Zoom. And Zoom works in the solution pad as well. But that's the only gesture support we have at this point. Nothing specific yet, no. But we are considering ways that they might fit within the workflow. I'm not sure what gestures would necessarily work. Yep. Yep. How long the iOS designer stays in alpha depends on how long the bug fixing process takes. There is no definite release date for that. But we will be updating the alpha channel as we fix bugs, so the alpha channel will gradually grow more stable, then it will graduate into beta, then stable. Yes, to use the alpha channel, just open up the updater, and at the top is a drop-down. Just switch that to alpha, press the button, switch to this channel. It'll download the updates, press install, and you'll have a full set of alphas. Yes, if you want to revert to stable, just go switch it to stable, click switch to stable, it'll download all the stables, click install, it installs them. Currently, it will re-download, it won't re-download them while you're switching them at one time, but as soon as you close Xamarin Studio, yes, it will re-download them. Yep. Sorry, I didn't quite catch that. I'm not familiar with that feature. Could you catch me afterwards and explain it to me? Cool. OK, so I think I should probably wrap up now because I'm 5 minutes over. But if you have any more questions, please come and catch me outside in the Darwin Lounge or tweet at me, go on my website. I have lots of great tips there too. Yes, and thank you for coming.